Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Madeline Barlow. I am the founder of MindWise Mentoring and the Drexel University Mental Performance Coach. So I'm tuning in here from Philadelphia. If we want to get people going in the chat, I'd love to even hear where some of you are tuning in from. So if you're open to it, feel free to drop that into the chat for us so we can see where everybody's coming from today. Super excited to have you all here with us. So to get started, I'm just going to quickly introduce our panelists. First, we have Dr. Jasmine Highsmith, the founder of Female Athletes Rock. Welcome, Jasmine.
Hi.
Awesome. Next, we have Shikha Kandan, the Director of Partnerships at Silicon Valley Exercise Analytics. Hi, Shikha.
Hey, Madeline. Thank you.
Hi. And then we have Charmeachealle, founder of We Living Inc. and former NFL player. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And it is really cool. Some people are letting us know in the chat where they're tuning in from, and we've got people from all over. How cool is this? Amazing. I love this. Awesome. Okay, so just to get us started, we really wanted this to feel like an open conversation, a little less interviewee. That's not really my style. I don't feel like it's many of the panelist styles either. So we're going to go with some nice fluid conversation here. So for all of you that are tuning in, feel free to use the chat and the Q&A. If you have specific questions, you might want to pop it in the Q&A so that I can make sure I see that and we can answer those questions in real time as they fit into our conversation. But to start us off, I'd like for all of our panelists to just give an introduction into their story, their background, anything as it relates to this awesome topic of grit, resilience, and facing adversity. I'd love to start with you, Dr. Highsmith.
Awesome. So good morning or afternoon, everybody. I'm here from Houston, Texas, so it's still morning here. But I am Dr. Jasmine Highsmith. I am the founder of Female Athletes Rock, and I am a former collegiate athlete. I attended the University of South Florida and competed on the track and field team from 2005 to 2009. I founded Female Athletes Rock in 2013, shortly after my undergrad stint, just because I had a very hard time transitioning from the sport and into whatever was next after the sport. I wasn't 100% prepared for the transition after competing from high school. I started competing at 14, went to college on a scholarship, and those 8 years track was just my life. And after it ended, I had no idea what I wanted to do next. What there was to do next, and really no guidance in that area. So since then, I created Female Athletes Rock as a way to still remain in sports, but also empower and inspire female athletes. And in doing so, I'm also helping athletes prepare for that transition post-sports, because I understand how hard it was, and I don't want other athletes to be in that what's next phase. So if we can figure it out ahead of time, they won't have that. They won't spend time in that space trying to figure out what to do next.
Amazing. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, Shikha, would you mind being the next to introduce yourself?
Thank you. So I'm Shikha Kandan. I'm originally from India. I grew up there and I competed for India. I swam competitively for about 15 years, represented India at the 2004 Olympics in swimming. And then I moved out to the US about 10 odd years ago. And ever since, I've been pursuing my career in the sports industry. I was at a few fitness wearable startups. And right now, I'm currently at a company called SVEXA, and I'm a director of partnerships there. And what we do is really help athletes and teams. They're collecting a lot of data day in and day out, and just helping them understand what all of that data means, so they can get actionable insights from it on a daily basis. So really hoping to optimize their training and performance, and really happy to be here as part of this panel.
Amazing. Thank you. Charmeachealle.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you everybody for being here, going on, taking the time out of your day to come and listen to some great speakers. I'm just honored and pleasured to be a part of this panel with Dr. Highsmith as well as Ms. Tandon. My name is Charmeachealle, former NFL player. I played a year with the Chargers. I'm the vice president of the Dallas-Fort Worth NFLPA chapter. I have a nonprofit called We Living, and where we take former professional athletes and we help them transition into a mentoring role into the school system so that we can be a reinforcement to principals, the staff, as well as be a mentor to the students and be a mentor to the coaches to help them be able to teach. And the big part about that is what we wanted to do is help what Dr. Highsmith started off saying is helping them transition. When I got done with the NFL, I battled a lot to make it there. I had brain surgery in college back in 2015 at the University of Kansas State. 8 out of 9 doctors told me I'd never be able to play the sport again and that I'll have to have my whole pituitary gland pulled out and I'll be on medicine for the rest of my life. We had an experimental surgery where I got accepted into the National Institution of Health, where they cut under my lip, broke my nose, moved it to the side, and went through my nasal canal to cut my tumor out piece by piece. And that's how I was still able to play football. 4 months after I had my brain surgery and I was back playing football, my father passed away due to an incidental heart attack. So having to battle through those traumas in life to where I lost my best friend, I made the decision to go back to finish playing football because the dream was to make it to the NFL. I graduated from Kansas State in the 2 years that I was there playing football, as well as being a student, was able to have my degree finished at the onset of finding out I had brain surgery. So one of the things that Ms. Highsmith talked about is once you get done with the sport, it's what's next. They look at us as, okay, we're done with you. Now you have to figure out what else you want to do in life. So helping athletes transition, battle through their traumas is what I'm really about, being able to help them understand and build a better generation so that when the youth builds up, they are able to transition better than what we were when we were coming up. So thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Amazing. It's really inspiring room, everybody. I felt inspired just when I met the 3 of these panelists the other day. So I'm sure we'll get some extra inspiration throughout the rest of the day. So I do want to keep this first question a bit broad because it is going to be really relative to each one of you. But I want to get us started talking about mental health in sport, or our experience with mental health resources, or mental health struggles while you were an athlete, whether at the student athlete, collegiate level, or also professional level. So we want to go back to Dr. Highsmith.
Absolutely. Mental health is such a taboo topic, and especially in the world of sports, because when people think of athletes, there's this major, like, superhuman thing that people put athletes in. So when you say mental health and athlete, people don't understand it. Oh, well, you're so strong, you shouldn't have to deal with that. And I think that we put such a major emphasis on being strong that people forget that not only do we have to be physically strong, but we have to be mentally strong as well. And so I can remember being in college and I lost my grandmother, and it was very sudden, and not really understanding the dynamics of grief. That was the first person close to me that I lost. But there were no answers for me either. My coaches were just like, they didn't know what to say and what to do. Or you can see somebody on campus, but there was no real push for trying to deal with grief. And I wasn't the only athlete, and I'm sure several athletes have had that, reached a space in college where something traumatic has happened to them, whether it was something at home, something they've been dealing with that went undiagnosed. There were really no resources to deal with it. No one told you what to do, and then you kind of just had to figure it out on your own. So now there's a bigger push to add that mental health aspect and mental health wellness into the culture of collegiate athletics. And I think now they're being a lot more proactive than reactive, because there was no preparation for it. You send these kids to school and they're kind of just there. They're on their own. They're adults. People forget to think about what they come from, if they're experiencing any kind of PTSD or anything that's hindering them from not only competing in their sport, but competing in the classroom as well. And so I think now there's a bigger push for it. And I think as we continue to talk about it and educate people more, it'll just be widespread throughout all of the organizations, all the sports organizations, because it's still a taboo topic. It's like people kind of tiptoe around it when we're speaking of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that actually leads to a really nice segue coming over to you, Shikha. And I know you had shared with us the other day around being an athlete who did have to travel away from home. And so this idea of dealing with potential barriers of any kinds or challenges of any kind while traveling away from home, away from that support system. I'd love to hear your experience.
Sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, especially in a sport like swimming where, you start off young, you start competing at a pretty young age, and, more often than not, you're away from your family at camps and traveling for different events. But I think when we talk about mental health and the challenges, just like Dr. Highsmith mentioned, that there is a push for it now and we're being more proactive. But I think the whole concept of mental health needs to be woven into our daily conversations. Like when we talk about athletes, when we talk about their performances, we look at, their physical performance, how are they training, how are they feeling physically, and we talk about, just like mental training. And I don't think those conversations happen often enough. I think mental health also needs to be spoken about every day. When you have those conversations with your coach as to, what should my workout be today? How should I be thinking about my day and my practices? And we need to start those conversations. How are you feeling emotionally as well? Because all of that factors into how you're able to perform, be it training, be it at an event. So, there are challenges, and I think we need to start having those conversations more. Coaches need to be educated on, how do you even navigate these conversations? Because everyone's different. Some people would like to open up, some people would not like to open up. And there are different ways to approach it. It could be something as, I'm just really stressed out with, something happening at home. Or it could be something, way more serious where you need to maybe get in more resources. So I think that's where we really need to be going when we talk about athletes, especially younger athletes, because they don't necessarily know what they're going through. And, you need to have someone who's knowledgeable about this field, guide them. And really, that's how you extend careers. That's how you take them and transition them for what's to come. Because the challenges are only going to get harder as they move.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that as well. Charmeachealle, I'd love to hear your experience as well. And we were talking about, this idea of having these conversations be more woven in. Did you find that they were woven in your experience, or, were there other ways that you feel that could have been done that might have benefited you and your teammates on a higher level?
For sure. One of the key, I was reading the comments here while we was going, and it was some great comments talking about the difference of mental health and mental illness. I think we really need to shed light on that because going through Kansas State, when I had my tenure at Kansas State, my coaches never seen anything that I experienced, having to have brain surgery, still coming back to the field, not really knowing how to coach me through that. They were supportive. They was there. My teammates didn't know at the time when I first got admitted to the hospital because my body was going through rhabdomyolysis that I was even in the hospital. It was a week before my teammates came to see me. And they knew that I was actually in there before my closest friends were able to show up. And so being able to battle through those things, and when I had the death of my father, having to battle through, because I had already graduated, if I was going to transfer and go back home, or if I was going to stay at Kansas State and finish my tasks and my job, that was something that was very a hard time. And I'm so grateful for my teammates and my coaches that I had at the time down there at Kansas State, because my family, I was married at the time. I had 2 kids, and my family moved back to Dallas, Texas, while I'm up here in Manhattan, Kansas by myself, battling through those emotions, battling through those traumas. And one of the key things that I try to teach coaches and talk to students about, and student athletes specifically, is handle those traumas. Don't neglect them or go away from them, because one of the key things that I did, which was almost detrimental to me once I retired from football, is I didn't handle the traumas when they were faced in my life. I've took all my emotions and my frustration out on the field, because when we're young, they tell us, hey, take them emotions and put them in the field, put them in your play, take them out on your opponent. And what that does to an athlete, a true diehard athlete that is a competitor, we get into that mindset of dominating. I was taught and bred to dominate a man play after play and inflict my will on that man play after play. And once you don't have that physical outlet anymore and the game is taken away from you, you still have that mindset. You still have those practices. You still dealing with those endorphins that are running through your body that you have to figure out how to calm down and to really reprogram your mind so that you won't take it out on your wife, your spouse, your kids, your coworkers and things of that nature. So just being able to teach the kids how to deal with trauma at an early age, teaching the athletes how to deal with the traumas, that it's okay to feel that the way that you're feeling. Because Miss Highsmith and as well as Miss Tandon talked about when you're in that sport and you're traveling and you're going to the way to where I know the NFL was what I was destined to do. I didn't let brain surgery get in my way. Didn't let the death of my father. I went through a divorce when I was getting ready for the NFL, going into the draft. And so not forsaking everything and letting all that go while I was still focused. It was hard, and I battled through suicide once I was done with the game and once it was taken away. So I think we have to continue to have those conversations about mental health. I met with my teen psychologist every day when I was down at the Chargers because I was dealing with so many different things and having to have back surgery when getting into the NFL. It's like, come on now. Like, do I really have to go through all of this? So I think it's very important.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to connect all of what we're saying here back to, the topic of this talk, which is that idea of grit and resilience. And Dr. Highsmith, you talked about strength or being superhuman at the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. And I do think there's this idea that strength means pushing through or pushing your emotions away or leaving things at the door. And what it sounds like we're talking about here is really reframing what strength means, right? And what it can look like in an athletic scenario, but then we can also be able to take that outside of sport. So Dr. Highsmith, anything else you can share about that idea of strength or even opening the dialogue with coaches, administrators, et cetera?
Absolutely. So again, when speaking in sports, because kids, we start playing sports at such a young age, we have to tackle it at a young age. And that's going into the youth leagues and going into the high schools and the middle schools and preparing the coaches, because that's where the kids spend most of their time and who they spend a lot of their time with. Sometimes our coaches know things that our parents don't know about us just because we spend so much time with our coaches, especially once you specialize in your sport and you plan on going higher and higher in that arena. So I think what we can do is education is key, because we don't talk about what we don't know. We can't practice what we don't know. And again, I think someone in the chat mentioned mental illness versus mental health and differentiating the two and trying and getting people to understand that the two are not the same. Mental illness is exactly what it says as an illness. And then mental health is just like your physical wellness. Just like you go to the doctor, every year for a yearly checkup, you should be seeing somebody regularly. But another thing that prevents that is access. And there's limited access because everyone knows that therapy costs money. And in some communities, we don't have access to therapists. We don't have access to funds to do that. So we have to find ways to create those avenues for people. Making it accessible so that people can send their kids to therapy regularly, and not just for the sport, but for life. Because I see a therapist, quarterly, just for my quarterly mental health. And if I have to see her more than that, I will. But we definitely, I think Ms. Bryan said maintenance versus emergency room. And that's exactly what it is. We have to do the maintenance because we react when it blows up. It's like, oh my God, but we have to do the preparation for it.
Yes. Amazing. I love that. Shikha, do you have any thoughts on this in terms of, again, that mental health versus mental illness and access, or your experience with those types of things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's really key to kind of talk about this every day. And, in terms of resources, when people start having these conversations more, when it just becomes mainstream, you're going to have more and more resources pumped into this field. And that's just how it works, where there is a demand for something, you're going to have people trying to find innovative solutions. So I think it really starts with that conversation, the conversation with the coach and the athlete, the conversation with, family and the athlete, the conversation with your, extended support system, be it your friends, be it your, with sport, you're typically in school or in college. So with your classmates, with your teammates, and having those conversations, being, open to having those conversations and not, looking at someone differently just because they want to talk about something that is taboo. And and I think that's really going to go a long way.
Yeah, I love that. And, we've been talking for the majority of this time now in some way or another about coaches, right? And coaches having such a big influence on our athletes, of course, right? For some people, they even might consider their coaches like a second, second mom or dad or, other type of family member. So the influence there is clearly very big. And yet, a lot of this will involve looking inward for all of us, but our coaches included. Charmeachealle, could you speak to that a little bit around your thoughts of how to really get the conversation started when it involves some deep work for our coaches included?
I really believe it starts, like we all been saying, it starts young, but also being honest. We, us as athletes, we always look at it, and us as people in general. I hate separating athletes from the regular society, but for this conversation, we can definitely have that conversation. Being able to be vulnerable. When you're an athlete and you're a high performing athlete, you don't want to show any weakness. You're taught to work on your weaknesses and perfect your strength. And so being able to get these athletes to understand and talk from a personal experience, I had to really let my guard down. I had to be vulnerable. I had to let my coaches know, hey, today is a hard day, and being able to have a true open conversation. And Bill Snyder, my head Hall of Fame coach, Bill Snyder, broke it down to me in a great way. Once I was experiencing things, he said, Moore, I haven't experienced some of the things that you experienced. I'm here to help you. I'm here to work with you, but we have to do this on a separate time. And I think that's very key for athletes to understand that you have to put the work in. It takes the extra work, not when you get there at the field that day and you're having a bad day, or not just talking to your coaches in practice, but having conversations outside of practice, having conversations during the daytime, during their downtime. Coaches need to really get more involved in checking on their kids outside of that practice time, that practice stint, because when we in the office and we're there to do practice or we're there in game, their only mind is focused on the game. Their only mind is focused on getting prepared for the next phase. But if we take the time, and I used to go in my coaches' offices and sit down and close the door and let them know, hey, I'm really struggling. I'm battling with suicide. I'm battling with, depression. I'm battling with all these different things. And why am I feeling this way? They were able to let their guard down and understand, hey, this is what I'm struggling with too. I don't have the answers for you right now, but we can definitely find the answers. And then my coaches even start mentoring and sharing things with me. And during that process of dialogue and back and forth, I was able to help them break through some barriers, break through some changes, to help the second generation that comes after me, that they'll be involved in. So I really believe that it comes down to really saying and coming out and being open, saying, hey, I do have a problem. I do struggle with this, but I'm willing and seeking to get help, so that you can show, you can work on that weakness to make it become a strength of yours.
Amazing. Yeah. And you know what? We really can have it come from both sides. We can work as a whole to empower our athletes to speak for themselves, right? And put a voice to that, which is amazing. And also at the same time, doing similar work for our coaches, right? Giving them that empowerment to say, hey, we can have tough conversations. It doesn't just have to be about what we're doing on the field, in the pool, etc. Someone said, I think it was Bryn said, vulnerability is key. Again, coaches giving the athletes permission to be vulnerable. So coaches themselves being vulnerable. Oh, it's the coolest thing when I see a coach be vulnerable or connecting really deeply with their athletes. Oh, so cool. So cool. I love it. Dr. Highsmith, I'd love to talk a little bit more, because we've got about maybe 15 or so-ish minutes now. I'd love to focus in a little bit more around working with women athletes, right? That is a main focus of our conversation throughout the day. So anything that you can speak to there, I know we had talked a little bit about access at one point, but anything at all that might be a bit more particular to our amazing and empowered women athletes out there.
Absolutely. So being a female athlete or an athlete that is a woman is special, because not only are there's a expectation for you, but there's behind the scenes, there's so much more going on in our lives, our mental, our physical, compared to what male athletes experience. And, as of right now, we are able to see that, with social media, it has now become a surprise that female athletes receive different treatment from male athletes. But it's never been a surprise. Those of us that have been female athletes in the past, we've seen this treatment. And I think it's important that when, as a woman and as a female, as a athlete competing, it's important to speak up and be heard and make your voice heard. Because for so long, they've silenced us and they made it a privilege for us to compete and be represent ourselves in the sport. And I think it's important that in this time, while we have the opportunity to, we have to speak up. We have to and we have to advocate for female athletes. Those of us that don't play anymore or we're connected to the sport, we have to be an advocate for them and do whatever you do, which is why I founded Female Athletes Rock, because I had a friend who was a former athlete and she participated in a celebrity basketball game with some guys, and they asked her to wear like some short shorts, and she was like, well, why can't I wear basketball shorts? And so those type of things, the looking at putting female athletes in a box and expecting them to stay in that box and wanting them to have a certain look and be a certain size. And those are the things that female athletes deal with when it comes to being an athlete. And so I created Female Athletes Rock to kind of break down those barriers and those stereotypes and show the world that female athletes, there isn't a look, there isn't a look, a body size. We don't have to stay in the box. We can compete and be mothers. We can compete and have other hobbies as well, because when people think you athlete, they're like, oh, you just need to be an athlete. You have to stay in this box.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. And I feel like what you were really talking about there is being able to be your truest, most authentic self, whoever that is, not necessarily having to be put into a certain box and show up a certain way, but really acknowledging, hey, who am I? How am I perceived or being perceived, but also how do I want to show up every day in what I do, whether that means as a woman, maybe you do want to wear makeup and jewelry, but also maybe you don't. And that's okay. Whatever feels the most true and authentic to you. Because as we know, when we're being our true self, we're freed up to do what we're meant to do in this life. So that's really beautiful. I love that so much. Shikha, I love to hear about your feelings around this. Again, just really directing it towards us supporting individuals who are women in sport, including yourself.
Yeah, I think another thing that I would like to add here is like just when we think about, stereotypes with women athletes, typically, a lot of people have this perception that, a woman athlete or female athlete has to be a certain way, they have to act a certain way. And also just even if you think about age, like they have to peak at this age, and then after a certain age, they need to get married or they need to start a family, and then, that's it. Like this is their path and this is what they have to stick to. And I think when anyone tries to deviate from that or tries to push the boundaries on any one of those, then they do get a lot of pushback, and it's, not often accepted in the most positive way. So I think just moving the conversation away from, that you need to do this at this age, you need to do that at that age, or, this is how you need to look as an athlete, physically, and this is how you need to, behave, emotionally. This is where you can't show emotions, you have to be strong, or, you're always showing emotions. Like you hear these conversations all the time. And I think we need to move away from that and treat women athletes just the way you would the men, where, you are an athlete and you're allowed to feel everything. And, we are here to support you, whether you want to compete, at the age of 20 or whether you want to compete at the age of 35. And, I've seen in my experience with some of my teammates, I had them drop out of competitive swimming just because, their family or their support team thought they were too muscular, or, swimming, you're outside your training and you get tanned. And so, you're too tanned and we don't like, just the way your skin looks right now. And so they've dropped out. And these are kids who are like in their teens. And so they're relying on the people around them to help them make these decisions. And when these are the kind of things you hear, it's not helping push women's sport forward. So I think, going back to the conversation, going back to how you have these conversations is really, really beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. Again, even just hearing that theme of really coming home to your true self and acknowledging what is it that I want to do, right? And also sport is what we do. It doesn't have to be who we are. But it's so easy for those two things to get really embedded in one another, right? And then also acknowledging the opinions of others around us and really hearing those things before being able to hear our own voice and our own truth, our own identity in that way. A quick shameless plug, sorry everybody, but it keeps coming up. I just wrote a book. Yay, I'm an author now. It's amazing. And a lot of the themes that we're talking about come up in this book, and it's called The Highly Sensitive Athlete, because Shikha, you were just talking about, being an athlete, put your emotions away. We don't need to feel all of those things, or why are we feeling those things? And this goes for men and women, people of all gender identities, but being emotional is part of our human experience, really. But in sport, we're like, it's not emotional? What do you mean? Sport is so emotional. It's so emotional. We're like, we want passion. Nobody would watch sports on TV if it was not full of excitement and passion, which is emotion, right?
Agreed.
So it's again about reframing this idea of strength and sensitivity. We can be both. And also sometimes being sensitive is the strongest thing that we can do. So sidebar, sorry, had to throw that in there. But Charmeachealle, I'd love, and we're coming up on the end. So, but let's get a few thoughts from you, especially from someone who works with, it sounds like, all athletes, right, across the board. I'd love to hear your experience in what we're talking about now.
Well, first of all, congratulations to all you, all the women athletes. I really don't like to separate the two, because at the end of the day, if I'm rocking with you and we compete, hey, I don't care what you look like. I don't care your gender. Let's go out and get this W. So I definitely want to say that I do agree that I really believe that it depends on the group around, like Ms. Tandon was talking about, who's influencing these athletes, who they're listening to. A lot of times as athletes, we listen to that lie that we're told that, hey, you're just an athlete, shut up and dribble, or, things that just associate us with the sport. And really, we take that lie. I can talk about personally from myself. When I retired from football, I thought, hey, what else am I going to do? Only football is all I know. I've been doing football for 25 years of my life, and I don't know what else to do. That's all I'm really good at. But then I sat back and I started looking. I started reprogramming and retraining, and it was like, no, football is what I did. It's not who I am. Football is only a short part of my life, and I have a long way to live. And so being able to establish and be able to help these kids identify, okay, yes, this is what I do, but this is not who I am. I am this person on the outside of this sport. Don't get it twisted. And if you stay hold to that and really hold on to that, I really believe that, you'll have a lot of individuals that will stay true to themselves and not worry about what the naysayers say, not worry about what the spectators say, because they're not in the trenches with you doing the work. They're not in the office in your locker room with you that's getting yelled at from the coach, that's pushing yourself and getting up working these extra hours and honing your craft. They're not in that room. They're just spectators. So if we get away from, one of my great friends, Dennis Gillian, spoke about the OCD comparison disorder, not obsessive compulsive disorder, but obsessive comparison disorder that we all deal with as human beings. Is where we're looking at other individuals in our sport or in our same world or in the age group, and we compare our lives and ourselves to that individual when our life is our own. And you have to understand that your life and your path is on your own, and the way that you plan on getting to the end, you have to be held accountable for that. It's not your parents, it's not your coaches. It's really up to you to make that step. And so I truly believe once we give the power back to the player, get the power back to the individual, that we'll see a big difference and have a big change of going on a positive way.
Amazing. So awesome. So to wrap up, why don't we just go around one more time with one takeaway? One takeaway that from this conversation, or one final thing to leave everybody with on this really, really impactful topic. And either we can go with Dr. Highsmith or we can go anywhere we would like. I don't want to pressure anyone if we're not ready yet.
I can go. One takeaway, I think the biggest part is identity, and making sure that we teach our kids once they start competing as an athlete, because people are going to, once you become an athlete, they're going to make you just an athlete, to have an identity and own their own identity. Don't let others tell you and dictate what you should do. Having that identity is going to help you once you're in the sport and you're ready to leave the sport, because sports is the foundation for the rest of your life. Even if you play up until you're 40, you still have a whole lot of life to go. So there has to be something you want to do outside of that sport.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, and building on that, I would say, like when you're in your sport, that just consumes your entire day. And so I think when you're thinking about that transition from, your sporting career to something outside of that, I think it's key to, just think about what other interests you have, because like everyone's mentioned, you're an athlete, but what really takes you forward is that athlete mindset and the lessons that you learn from being an athlete. And, that's what you transition into and use day to day when you're in your professional career. So, think about those aspects and, use those to help you guide, what your interests are and where you want to go and the things that you want to do day to day, because it's very easy, to get lost in that transition phase, because you're trying to feel the way you did as an athlete and, feel that sense of purpose, find that motivation on a day to day. And, if you dedicate that time, spend some time into thinking about what else you could do, it definitely goes a long way in making that transition smooth and helping you feel that, you are contributing in a way that is, 100% for yourself.
Awesome. Love it.
I love, just to piggyback on what everybody has said, is using sports as a vehicle and understanding. I say this all the time. When you're playing a sport, for some it may end after high school, for some it may end after college, and some may make it to the professional world, but that sport will end one day. You have to figure out what you will do after that. How are you going to provide for your family? How are you going to make a major impact into the world and be able to build the younger generation up, but also pull your your counterparts for your farmers that have went before you and paved the way. That's one of the things that we're doing here. We're giving back to the farmers and paying homage to them while we're helping them instruct and gather and build our youth, the future generation. It takes us all. It takes a village. So understanding that one day I will remove myself. Well, one day I will be removed from this sport. I have to be able to navigate through that process and get around like-minded people that support and love and don't judge. Get away from judgmental people. Get towards positive individuals so that you can find that true identity of who you are, what you want to do, so that you can be successful, but also pulling others up while you're tackling success. So that's the takeaway that I give.
So good. This was so fun. Well, on that note, look at that timing. That was awesome. Okay, thank you all for joining this really, really incredible panel. And we will move into whatever is next. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.